Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Meslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. William Shewfelt is returning for part 2 on the Carnivore Cast. He was guest number 1 and is the author of the Carnivore Shredding Program, podcast host of the Will to Win podcast, which I'm loving, and the Better, Stronger, Faster podcast with Chris Bell, another former Carnivore Cast guest. William is an all-around Renaissance man and also the Red Power Ranger on Nickelodeon. Welcome back, William.
Dude, Scott, thank you so much for having me back, man. It was honestly a huge honor to be your first guest, and it's really, really good to be back on. I love the juxtaposition of Renaissance man and Power Ranger. It's just fantastic.
Well, you can't have one without the other, right?
No, I actually, you probably can. Actually, I got to ask, are you based out of New York?
I'm based in Boston. My fiance is from New York, so I get there maybe once a month, once every other month. But yeah, I'm an East Coast guy.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, man, I was absolutely in love with New York this past week. I got to head up there with Chelsea, and we were actually picking the brain of a lot of the people at VaynerMedia, trying to figure out, all of the strategy behind Gary Vee's content and all that kind of stuff. So it was really cool. But overall, dude, I love New York. Absolutely love it.
That's awesome. I'm not going to lie, seeing a lot of your posts of like beach workouts and running around in the sun in Santa Monica definitely don't make me love the East Coast anymore. But it's totally different vibe. Totally get you there.
Grass is always greener, man. I love the energy you guys got over there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, William, let's start big. I want to ask you, what drives you to do what you're doing? What gets you up in the morning? What gets you excited?
I would say coffee. But besides that, okay, so yeah, I guess let's go deep with this. I have a lot of dreams, a lot of ambitions, and a lot of them, I'm trying to figure out where these come from. But it's just like dreams that I've always had since I was young, and my mother was great enough to give me a great deal of confidence to go for them as a young person. So this kind of started with a leap of faith with acting. I was doing my economics degree, and I think we might have got into this on the first podcast. But yeah, I was like pretty far into my economics degree, and I took a leap of faith and decided to become an actor. And that process just taught me so much about the fact that you can actually craft the life that you want to have, and that you never really have to settle for something that you don't want to be doing. So ever since then, it's been a constant quest of, how can I tap into all of my talents to give the most possible of myself to the world? And, initially that was in acting. And then I realized after a little while, that I wasn't enjoying so much the process of that, especially the audition process. And I was very, very passionate about, just carnivore, ancestral health, paleo, like this whole nutrition sphere that we're in. It's completely changed my life in so many ways. And I was really passionate about sharing that information. So that's kind of the direction I've been led in recently. And, I'm self-aware enough to know that I really, really enjoy working. It's just something I find fun, and I'm probably at my happiest when I'm doing as much as possible. So that's kind of one of the things that drives me too. It's just a source of joy.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think the listeners will agree with me that everyone really appreciates everything you're doing. And I think you're providing a ton of value while having a good time with it. So that's really great to hear. And something you posted about recently, William, and I'd love to just hear you kind of riff on a little bit, is you talked a little about judgment and hate in this kind of online diet and nutrition space. I think you had an Instagram post about it. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's a couple different forms of judgment, but the first thing that I think is really important is to not judge yourself throughout this process. That's something that I can kind of be guilty of, but a lot of the time we can put this crazy undue pressure on ourselves to be perfect all of the time. And this is actually something I was talking to David Webb about recently when we started this Carnivore Shredding Challenge, where I hit a point where my weight was dropping super fast. And I want to be completely honest and authentic with people. So I told them, hey, there was this night where I had mashed potatoes because I felt like I was getting way too lean too fast. And I couldn't really dial it back in time. And I judged the hell out of myself for that. I was really, really upset that I did that. But I think that's one of the important things, is to learn from some of these mistakes, to learn from this process, and just be open and transparent with yourself about it. Realize what's working, what's not, and kind of take people along the journey. There's also a lot to be said for social media with that too. There is a lot of unnecessary bickering, you know. I think that the most important thing we can be doing is sharing what's working for us. And hopefully that strikes a chord with somebody else out there that, you know, might be in a similar position that could benefit from what you're doing. So that's something that I try to do. And I never really understand these crazy online wars, especially on Twitter, which just get ridiculous sometimes. So I think it's always good to just sort of back off of that sort of negativity and make sure you're focused on, you know, giving value, being positive about it. Actually, one of the really interesting happenings recently on my Instagram, I posted up this picture. So Chelsea and I, when we were in New York, we went to go visit like all of the different spots. And in front of the Trump Tower, there was actually this guy who was like Secret Service, and he was decked out in all of this gear. He had all this equipment on him. And then there was like I guess you would call him like a bellboy or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what it is. But so I decided it would be cool to take a picture with that guy. I took a picture flexing next to the Secret Service guy. He was actually cool enough to pose for the picture. And obviously we're in front of the Trump building, so there's like there's a sign in the background. So I posted it up and I said, you know, who's got more guns or something like that. It was just sort of a funny tongue-in-cheek post. And dude, oh my gosh, like a war started on my Instagram. It was crazy. People were like, I'm so disappointed, like you've let me down, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, people inferred so much from, you know, kind of a fun post. So yeah, I mean, I think people always just got to take a step back and have a sense of perspective about things. But that was an eye-opening experience for me because I don't usually get those kind of strong reactions on my page.
Yeah, wow. Don't take yourself too seriously too.
Yeah, that's the key.
And William, I know you've gone through some recent kind of lifestyle and career changes, just kind of how you live your day and what you're focusing on. Do you want to talk a little bit about those and what's inspired them?
Yeah, that's actually really, really fun to get into. So over the past kind of year and a half, I've been trying to figure out, you know, how am I able to get the most done in the day? Because I just don't feel as happy when I'm not getting a ton done. And there were a couple people that I was looking at their daily routines and I was kind of assessing what they do. And I decided to adopt certain elements of that. So one of the things I've been doing recently that I'm really enjoying is just getting up at 3 a.m, going to the gym at 3:30. I work out until about 5. And then from, you know, 5 to 6, kind of get ready for the day. Get my things together. I'll be at a coffee shop at about 6 a.m. And then I just work for the rest of the day until I'm ready to call it quits at night. And that's really allowed me to get everything that I need to get in a day done. Because in terms of balancing, like right now I'm kind of a one-man operation. I do have a great team that's helping me out with the Primal Body stuff, but besides that, I'm kind of like this one-man operation where I'm doing like podcasts, blog posts, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, building this business, creating content around it, editing, all this kind of stuff. So to get all of those different moving pieces, you know, in order and to get everything done, it does take a lot of time. And kind of 3 a.m. is the only way that I've been able to get all that done. I saw Mark Bell, and I actually learned a lot from him when I went up there to Sacramento. And they were telling me, like, the guys there, they're getting up at 2:30 in the morning. They're training at 4, and they're getting so much done throughout the day. Like, Mark Bell has an extremely well-oiled operation up in Sacramento. So that's something I learned a lot from. I'm still sticking to the tried and true principles of goal setting. So I'm still a huge fan of setting major goals, breaking them down, working on those daily, having daily habits. For me, some of those look like, reading 10 pages every day, getting to bed at a certain time, daily workouts, eating my 2 meals a day, supplementation protocol. So all of those different kind of things. But I would say definitely the 3 a.m.s is something that I've never tried before, and I'm in love with it. It's working really, really well for me so far.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how dedicated you are. And, when you make a habit of it, the discipline almost builds on itself in this kind of cycle.
Absolutely.
And let's get into food a little bit. Talk about carnivore, what you've learned over the last, few months. You've been doing it for a while now. You've put out some great programs, helped a ton of people, interacted with people on social media. I know you've collaborated with folks like Paul Saladino and a lot of the greats in the space. So what have you learned and what have you changed?
Yeah, so my understanding of it early on, the thing that really made a huge difference for me, and this is what the whole carnivore shredding was based on, was just the idea of increasing your protein to energy ratio, which is a great concept that Ted Naiman's done a great job at popularizing. But I found that I was able to nail my body composition and help a bunch of other people do this by increasing the protein and actually dialing back the fat a little bit. And that was a lot of the basis of the Carnivore Shredding Program, as well as a fasting protocol and certain things like zone 2 cardio and weight training. But since then, I think that there's been a lot of great information that's come out in this space, especially thanks to Dr. Paul Saladino and everyone that's sharing information around, the importance of maybe including some collagen, maybe including some calcium, paying attention to your iodine, your salt intake. So there's a lot of little boxes that I think would be really, really smart for people to check off. Kind of what a typical day of eating for me currently looks like. There's just a few things that I'm trying to have every single day. And then on top of that, it's just a bonus. So the kind of boxes that I'm trying to check off every day, I'm having beef. That's the majority of my diet. That could be in the form of ribeyes, New York steaks, ground beef, chuck roasts, things like that. And then eggs. I'm always doing pasture raised eggs. I think that's really important. And since the yolk is a major source of nutrients in this carnivore diet, at least for me it is, I try to make sure I'm getting really high quality there. Liver, that's something I've recently started. I was afraid of the whole vitamin A toxicity argument and sort of going a little bit too hard on the liver. So I used to just do it once a week, but some of the information that's come out around it recently suggesting that vitamin A toxicity might not be that much of an issue has kind of prompted me to experiment with it. So I'm a couple weeks into this experiment with doing 4 ounces of liver a day. I'm really liking it. Definitely haven't experienced any negative effects. I may be experiencing some increased energy. I feel really good, but it's a little too early for me to tell. And I've been doing that raw. I actually recently started trying the whole frozen thing, and it's gross. I'm not enjoying it, but it takes literally 0 prep time, so that's kind of the upside to it. The last few boxes, I'm definitely getting in some collagen daily, so for me that's about 5 to 7 tablespoons a day of collagen hydrolysate. I'm using the Great Lakes brand. I'm doing about 1 to 2 teaspoons of magnesium, usually at night, and I'll usually mix that up with the collagen and just put it in some water, shake it up, and make that into a little drink. And calcium. So that's another thing that I pretty much ignored early on with carnivore, but I was doing a lot of dairy back in the day. So I was doing a lot of cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, things like that. I cut that out after many times trying to cut it out. But finally I just decided, you know what? Dairy's out. Because for me, I noticed a few things. I would hold on to water weight. I'd hold on to some body fat, and my face would get a little bit inflamed, and I would tend to get dark circles with it. So I just decided, you know what? I'm going to cut it out. And, I kind of got rid of a lot of those issues. So I want a calcium source in the diet. So what I've been doing is using whole bone calcium and just taking about 1 to 2 teaspoons of that a day. Simply drinking that down with some water. So those are the major boxes that I'm trying to hit daily. And then on top of that, I'll occasionally have bacon. I might do some oysters or some salmon to get in some different micronutrients there, maybe cover some iodine and omega-3s. And then, if things are on the go, like I'll sometimes have a rotisserie chicken or just something super simple every now and then. Doesn't seem to affect me very much. I still very, very strongly believe in the importance of protein to energy ratio, depending on your activity levels and how much body fat you have to lose. I think if you have a lot of body fat to lose, you can definitely benefit from incorporating some fasting, increasing your protein and dropping back a bit on the fat. I think that all of those things, even increasing exercise a little bit, all of those things are going to help you drop fat more. One thing I experienced recently, though, like I was mentioning earlier, when I did this Carnivore Shred Challenge, and we started this a little over 2 weeks ago now, I didn't have much body fat to lose, but I was being very, very strict with myself about this. And I started experiencing a lot of symptoms of like low testosterone. I was getting, very, very tired. I felt like I was starting to lose muscle. I was getting even leaner than I was before, which honestly isn't a good thing for me. I was starting to get that like sunken look in my face. And I was thinking, crap, like eating high protein to energy ratio for my level of current activity and for how long I'm awake throughout the day and in terms of sleep deprivation, stuff like that, I really can't be doing that right now. So one thing I've had to do recently was to actually bring back in a lot of dietary fat just to make this approach work for me. So, a lot more ribeyes, just including a lot more fat overall, which I haven't done that in a long time. So strangely enough, it's actually a little tough to stomach right now, eating so much fat, but I'm definitely starting to feel a lot better, putting some muscle mass back on, like recomping my body. So I'm enjoying that. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with carnivore at the moment. And that's kind of how I've changed things. Really just paying attention to omega-3s, iodine, collagen, including some organs, calcium, things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. All really great advice. And I'm sure folks will benefit from, incorporating some of those small tweaks to really optimize and check all the boxes for a great nose to tail carnivore diet. And just a couple questions on that, William. Are you trying to eat meals at a certain time of day, or how do you know how long to fast? Is it kind of just, what works for you productively, and once you get hungry, you start to look for food, or are you sticking to a specific like fasting and meal schedule?
Yeah, so for me, it's basically I keep it super simple with myself at this point. It's fast as long as I possibly can until I can't fast anymore. Which is extreme, but it's not extreme. So like today, for example, 10 a.m., I was super hungry. Went home from the coffee shop, heated up some of the ribeyes I had in the fridge, and, ate that, went back to work. So very, very simple. I'm just fasting until I feel what I like to call true hunger. So not where you're just craving something or you're kind of peckish or you could eat, but to the point where you really need to eat. Like it's on your mind. Maybe your energy is starting to dip a little bit. So that's pretty much the point up until which I fast. Some days, like yesterday, I actually did a 23-hour fast. So I just wasn't hungry throughout the day. Today was probably more along the lines of like 14 to 15 hours. So yeah, it really just depends. I've focused a lot throughout this journey on listening to my body. I just didn't enjoy tracking anymore. I've done, the meticulous macro tracking, calorie tracking, specific eating windows and cutting yourself off at a certain time, even if you're still hungry. I've done all of that kind of stuff, and I've gotten to the point where I have to make this a lifestyle for myself. and I need to figure this out without any of those things. So I kind of view tracking as very useful. And it's sort of like the bumper lanes when you're bowling. It can kind of stop you from getting into the gutter. It'll help direct you along your path. But I think eventually, you want to take those bumpers off and you just want to go for it, and pay attention to that biofeedback you're getting. Pay attention to your body. I would rather look at the mirror than look at the scale, for example. So for me, I'm trying to be very, very intuitive. Like, am I tired? Do I feel like I'm salt depleted? Do I need some more fat in my diet today? Could I fast a little bit longer today? Do I feel like I should do a little bit more cardio or a little bit more weight training? I think that this is a skill and it takes a while to develop. Definitely takes a long time to develop, and you really have to get a good feeling for what your body's baseline is. But over time, I think it's what people should really aim for, unless they have a specific condition that they're trying to very carefully manage. But if your goal is just body composition and having great energy and enjoying your life, I think that everyone should be aiming for this sort of intuitive approach. And I've found that it's working for me. So I've been able to maintain a very, very lean body composition, great energy, great strength, within this intuitive framework of eating. And basically all it is it's kind of like I was just saying. So I just fast as long as I can into the day, and then I'm eating about 1 to 2 meals a day. Usually it was really high protein energy ratio, but now it's a little bit higher fat. And, it's red meat, eggs, some seafood, some calcium, collagen, magnesium, and that basically rounds out a day right there. And then every single day I'm training. So I'm a huge fan of just making training a daily habit. I think, the same way you have any other daily habit, I like to make exercise one of those. Just helps keep me consistent, sets me up for a great day. I feel more energetic in the mornings. So for training, for me, it's usually alternating weights or cardio. And yeah, within that framework of fasting, exercise, and, eating nutrient dense, high protein to energy ratio carnivore meals, it's very, very easy for me to maintain a lean body composition, and for a lot of the people that have done these carnivore shredding programs.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's all sound advice, and it really shows in your physique and how you've been able to stay really shredded and strong easily, it seems like. And the liver thing is super interesting. I talked to Dr. Paul Saladino a couple days ago, and he said he's eating 4 or 5 ounces of liver a day and doesn't really think, or at least he's yet to find evidence that there's kind of a top end for how much liver someone can eat. Now, obviously, if you eat a pound or 2 of liver a day, you probably won't feel great, even if it's just from the carbs. But I think eating 4 ounces of liver a day like you are is probably totally reasonable and a great way to top off your micronutrients. With the raw liver, are you at all concerned about salmonella or any type of food poisoning?
I'm not, but now that I know you did a podcast with Paul about that, I am. I would love to hear what he has to say about that. But basically, I did some fishing around. I asked a few smarter minds in this community their thoughts on that, and just about, the safety of doing this raw and doing it frozen. And the opinion I kept getting from a number of different folks was just, if you've had it frozen for about 2 weeks, you should be good just in terms of parasites.
Right.
So that's kind of the information that I've taken and run with, but I'm definitely going to be keeping my ears out for what Paul has to say on your upcoming podcast about that. I haven't experienced any negative side effects either yet. I'm really, really interested just to see how I feel in the long term, because some of these things, sometimes take some time to bioaccumulate, and you sometimes get exponential results once you've done something daily over time. I was kind of using Paul as a guinea pig for a while and just seeing, how's he feeling? How's he doing? I saw he was doing okay for a while. I was like, okay, I kind of want to try this. And then Danny Vega told me that he feels like an absolute tank right now and doing liver every day. And that was about all I needed to hear.
Yeah. He's a great guy.
Turns you into a tank. Okay, cool. I'm in.
Yeah, totally. And super quick question about the collagen. Are you making sure that's one of your meals, or, if you're trying to stick to 1 to 2 meals a day, And is the collagen drink, you just think of that as something separate, or are you having that with a meal?
Yeah, so I'm usually having that after a meal. I do like to keep that very close to my meals. I'm not a fan of, even within time restricted feeding, I'm not a fan of eating the whole time throughout that window. I would much rather just consolidate it to meals, you know? So I'll basically, I'll have a meal, and then maybe 10 minutes after that, when I start to get thirsty, I'll mix up the collagen and magnesium drink. And then I'll also put like a little bit of whole bone calcium in my mouth, drink that down with it, and just knock that drink out. So yeah, I do include it with the meals. In the past, I've included collagen with my coffee in the morning. Didn't have any issues with that at all. And Mark Sisson's put out some great information about how taking calcium before workouts can actually help shuttle it to the necessary areas. I think it was something to the effect of like it's kind of difficult for the body to actually transport collagen to your connective tissue. And a lot of the time that's done through the mechanism of physical activity and exercise and weight training. So I was doing collagen as sort of like a pre-workout drink, and I'd mix it in with some electrolytes and some salt. And then I would have some coffee as well, and I would go to the gym on that. I'm not doing that anymore. I don't really think it's much of an issue, though. It doesn't make sense to me. Like if you think about ancestral eating, and let's say you're doing like this nose to tail eating style, you would be eating a lot of collagenous bits of the animal with the muscle meat. You wouldn't be having that as like a random pre-workout sort of thing. So, I don't think that's a big deal.
Yeah. It's always weird when you kind of isolate a, part of your diet and have it on its own, like a whey protein shake or just having fat in coffee. Like, I think in general, it's just a good idea to combine nutrients.
That's a really, really good point. And I think a lot of people in our community know this already, but these nutrients exist in a matrix of other nutrients. Fat soluble vitamins, want to be going along with fat. B vitamins come with protein, and it comes with a ton of other nutrients. So it always makes sense to me. And I get a lot of DMs from people asking about taking different supplements. And the sort of answer that I give a lot of them is, what would the whole food source of that be? And just kind of stick with that. So I'm much more of a fan of whole foods over isolating nutrients.
Yeah, totally. And one thing, just a small thing while I'm thinking of it, is Paul recommends having the calcium on an empty stomach. And I've heard that before, just because I think it has, I'm not exactly sure, but I think it has something to do with calcium. Citrate can actually prevent your body from absorbing other nutrients. So this kind of like the counterexample to what we've just been talking about. But he said the best time to have like bone meal or calcium is like when you're on an empty stomach, and then you can have a meal like an hour later or something like that. So folks should definitely fact check me on that and look a little bit more into that. But I think Paul has talked about that. And then
interesting.
Yeah. And then one thing I wanted to just like dive in a little bit deeper with you. And I've talked to Paul about this, and recently he's like totally changed his stance on this. And I'm curious to get your take, and it's on the protein to energy ratio piece. So I personally feel best and I've experimented a lot doing kind of what you do. So eating, just enough fat to kind of keep me sane. So usually that's like 1 gram of fat to 1 to 2 grams of protein, and not adding a lot of fat. And when I try to lower my protein and up the fat to kind of like artificially make it more ketogenic or increase the energy from fat, it like my body I don't have the acid in my gut to break it down yet, I think. And I've had people on the show like Josh Blackburn, and Paul is now kind of touting this message where he thinks protein is a very poor energy source. And he thinks having a lot of protein, more than 40% of your energy from protein, or even more than 30%, is really ineffective. And it's kind of like a building block, but not a good fuel source. He's concerned about long-term carnivores eating, 2+ pounds of muscle meat or worth of protein per day, because it can elevate your blood glucose long term, your fasting blood glucose. And he thinks it's better to, ratchet back the protein. He's most recently said he's eating like 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of meat per day, including liver, and much more fat, adding a lot of suet, adding fat trimmings. And part of this is a lot of the protein to energy ratio research, which Ted Naiman cites, which I love, by the way. I think he's awesome. He's helped so many people, has great infographics. He's jacked. He's a genius. But a lot of the research appears to be in people on a standard American diet, and it talks about the benefits of protein going from, say, 10 to 15% of your diet to 20 to 30%, which obviously that's going to displace a lot of carbs. It's going to displace a lot of processed food. It's going to make you more satisfied. It's going to make you more full, increase muscle mass, decrease fat mass. But when you're already eating pretty much zero carb and you're already satisfying your protein requirements, I'm somewhat skeptical. And the theory goes that, moving from 30% protein to 40% protein or 50% protein could actually be a net negative. And it could be better for metabolic health, better for brain health, better for physical performance, for hormones, as you kind of alluded to have lower protein, maybe, 20% protein and 80% fat. So just curious what you kind of think of that theory. I'm totally, split on it and go back and forth, but curious to hear your thoughts.
There's a couple things I think about that. The first thing is I completely agree with Paul that protein is a very poor energy source. But strangely enough, I think that's one of the benefits of eating a very high protein diet. It's not something that your body wants to readily utilize for energy. So you're going to be burning through tons of fat. And I don't think you necessarily need to have a high absolute amount of protein in the diet. I think just as a percentage, if you're increasing the protein and sort of moderating the fat, I do think that you're going to end up burning a bit more body fat and you'll probably be a bit more satiated in a caloric deficit. Anytime I've tried to run a caloric deficit on myself with a higher fat, more moderate or lower protein ratio, I feel like absolute crap, and it just really, really doesn't support my training at all or my muscle mass. So I've never really enjoyed that. And I've always found it to be easiest to run a deficit or sort of like maintain a lean physique with a higher amount of protein and sort of a moderate amount of fat. Now, honestly, I think in a fat burning phase, you can absolutely go for like 2-to-1, protein to fat in terms of grams. But I don't think that that's something people necessarily need to do long term or should do long term. As long as you're eating sufficient fat, to support your metabolism, support your hormones, support your satiety, then on top of that, I kind of eat protein to satiety. Seeing as it's, 4 calories per gram, seeing it as it's extremely satiating. It's full of micronutrients, full of B vitamins. It's got the thermic effect of foods where it's going to burn itself up almost. To me, it's one of those things where I like to view it as like an unlimited macronutrient, and then I'm eating just enough fat to support myself and to not really start to put on too much body fat. I do really believe that, it still does come down to calories. There's a huge hormonal side of this. There's a huge nutrient balance side of this, but there's also the whole energy balance argument. And I do think that calories matter, and fat being extremely energy dense. If you're not in the mood to track things, if you're not of the persuasion of, wanting to count every gram, then I think that it's much easier in an intuitive way to sort of, increase your protein to energy ratio. And that kind of allows you to sort of hit a lower amount of calories. And I think that a lot of the ad lib satiety data supports this, where, when you increase protein, moderate fat, and drop the carbs back, you're just naturally going to be satiated at lower calories. So if you're tracking these macros, if you're tracking calories, perhaps you might feel better. Perhaps you might have a better hormonal profile on a higher fat, more moderate protein approach. I would say, especially if you're not training as much, especially if you're a little bit more sedentary. But I would say probably if you're training more, if you're very, very active, then I would not really ratchet back on the protein. I'm still definitely sort of in like the Naiman camp with that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Makes a lot of sense to me. And I think you have a great perspective on that. So William, let's talk a little bit about, Primal Body, your latest program. What is it? Who's it for? And should people be carnivore or keto for a while before starting the program? Let's hear about it.
Yeah. So Primal Body, basically I wanted to expand beyond Carnivore Shredding Program. And I wanted to create specific approaches for different goals. So Carnivore Shredding didn't cater specifically to, okay, let's say you want to do like a women's physique program, or let's say you just want to pack a bunch of muscle mass on, or let's say you're focused on endurance. And I believe that you can accomplish each and every one of those goals within a carnivore or keto framework. So what I did was I took, sort of my approach to carnivore and keto, and I made this whole thing customizable. So if you prefer keto and you like your plants, you like your non-starchy veggies, things like that, you can absolutely do that. We're still going to do higher protein to energy ratio. If you like carnivore, we have carnivore meal plans, and in the questionnaires you answer what you like to eat, what you don't like to eat. So we really customize the eating plans per the individual and create grocery lists for them, things like that. And from there, you can start this basically if you've never done carnivore or keto in your life. So it really starts in the least stressful way possible. We don't incorporate any fasting. We really try to keep people in the smallest deficit possible as they're adjusting to this, accounting for things like salt and some of the supplements that I recommend. So it's trying to take the smartest approach to this, and we really help people through the adaptation phase. And then as they start to continue on with these 12-week programs, we start to include some intermittent fasting. There's some optional cardio they can also throw in there. So it's a much more, let's say, gradual approach, and it's meant to really ease people into this way of eating and to get them the best results possible in 12 weeks if their goal is building muscle, or if they want to do one of the women's physique programs like the Sculpt, or if they just want to drop a bunch of body fat on the lean program. And there was also a lot of time and attention put into the training programs. So with the lean program, you can actually get really, really lean and kind of ripped without focusing that much on heavy weights. That's something I've played around with a lot in the past. And I've also put a few clients that didn't want to go to the gym. I've put them on these body weight calisthenics plans, and we realized that we can actually do sort of lighter weights, higher reps, and they get really great fat loss results with that. So that's one thing we factored into the lean program. With the strong program, it much more features the kind of things that I like to do in terms of reverse pyramid training, progressive overload with the weights, incremental, just increases in the weights per exercise, managing the volume. So the overall goal is just if people want to drop fat, if they want to build a bunch of muscle, or if they want to go with one of the women's programs that are a little bit more focused on the lower body and toning and sculpting. I've tried to just customize things so it's not just one carnivore shredding approach, but there's much more diversity in it. And there's just a lot more support with this new Primal Body. So, there's a whole exercise library. There's, we've got a Facebook group going. I've got a great team working with me on this now. So it's not me answering tons and tons of emails all day, but there's a great team helping me out with this now. So yeah, it's kind of the next evolution of things for me. And I've taken everything I've learned from the past year and a half of carnivore shredding and also everything I know about nutrition and training, and I've just put it into these. So I'm really, really excited to start pushing these and promoting these a little bit more.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Sounds like there's really something for everybody at all stages and all goals, and really a holistic offering. And I'm sure you put a ton of work and research into those, William, and I can't wait to check them out myself. And what other new businesses do you have coming soon? I know you're working on a book with Ted Naiman, but what can you leave with people with as kind of a teaser for what they can expect from you in the future?
Well, yeah, so there's two things going on right now that are sort of other projects I'm working on. One of them is this book with Ted Naiman, who I would say he is probably the key person in my health and fitness journey that really just simplified everything for me. And he's done this for so many other people. He's put out just an incredible amount of information on Twitter and through his infographics. So I would highly recommend everybody go check his page out, Dr. Ted Naiman, Naiman. But I could never fathom that he never had a book. I just figured like, man, this guy's got literally the simplest approach.
Yeah.
And here's what I really, really like about his approach. He focuses on maybe the 2 or 3 things that move the needle the most. So when we talk about like, the 80-20 principle or like, Pareto efficiency, just focusing on what's really going to give you overall results. Yeah, we can sort of nitpick about calcium and collagen and some of the smaller details that might give some results. But Ted literally just dials it down to, okay, you got to increase your protein to energy ratio. You got to do some fasting, and then 15 minutes a day, hit some body weight calisthenics, knock it out. And if everybody does that consistently day after day, as his Twitter results show from all these people sending in before and afters, like you get some incredible results. And I'm one of his success stories. When I started practicing these principles, it worked for me very, very fast. So yeah, we talked about doing a book last year and we sort of toyed around with the idea, and then we got really serious with it this year. And we're basically done with the book at this point. We're just wrapping it up, and we're in the stage of pitching literary agents and publishers and trying to get that whole thing lined up. We're not really trying to go the self-publishing route just because we would be limited in terms of distribution. I think we would just get much, much better distribution and get the word out there more, with going with a traditional publisher. So a lot of people are saying you make a lot more money off self-publishing, but honestly, the goal is just to get this book out there to as many people as possible. And the main goal of it is like, if my mom or dad could pick this up and look at the infographics, read the explanations and say, oh, okay, that's easy. So I just eat foods from this list, do a bit of fasting, have some cardio in the morning, and then cool, here's a really, really simple at-home workout I can do that's going to give me, in 15 minutes, it's going to give me a full body workout. Awesome. I can do that. That's my goal with this. Like I want, just the average Joe who doesn't have time for fancy explanations and a bunch of nutrition science to just pick this up, read it, and be like, okay, super easy. Both of those guys are ripped. I think they might know what they're talking about. Let me try this. And that's kind of the goal with it. And I'm also working on sort of like a carnivore cookbook at the moment. So that's something that I've been working on a little bit with Brad Kearns, and we're trying to put that out. By the end of the year would be the goal. But we're still working on that. That's still in the works. So that's been kind of fun as well. And it's, expanding my palate as a carnivore, because I'm very, very basic. Like as my girlfriend will attest to, I'm extremely basic. So I experiment a lot more with foods as a result. So that's kind of what I'm working on currently. And then over the next year, the goal is really just to focus in on the content. So really dial in the content that I'm working on. So put out way more blog posts, more podcasts, more YouTube videos, more Instagram, Twitter, all that kind of stuff. So just putting out as much free value and content as I can out there. That's really where my energy is going to be focused in the next year.
That's totally awesome, and I can't wait to see all the great things you're going to accomplish, William, and all the cool content coming out from you. And, you really praise Ted Naiman for breaking this stuff down, but I think you do an awesome job too of just giving people the essentials and practical tips that they can take home and start to implement in their own lives, one day at a time. I think your Instagram posts and your YouTube videos are really helping people do that. So thank you for that.
Dude, thank you, man. I really appreciate that. And kind of the goal with this is just like, what kind of posts would I have wanted to see like 2 years ago when I was trying to figure this stuff out? So yeah, I just really try to dumb it down. Some of the posts, some people might look at and say, okay, that's common sense, but sometimes common sense, like a lot of people might not know these things. So yeah, it's just trying to put the info out there.
Absolutely. Great. Well, I'll link to all of this in the show notes, but where are some good places for people to find out more about you?
Yeah. So the majority of my content right now, I would say where the best pieces of content are Instagram. I'm doing, 3-4 posts a day where I'm just trying to put out information around eating, around training, around mindset and daily routines, daily habits. So I think that's really, really important. The whole mindset part of this, it doesn't matter what your approach is if you're not good at implementing or executing on it. I've been putting out a lot more blog posts lately. So if people want to check that out, that's williamshewfelt.com/blog. Also YouTube, I put out YouTube videos and vlogs constantly. So that's youtube.com/willshewfelt. And probably the most fun platform for me recently has been the podcast. I don't know if I like to hear myself talk or if it's just a fun platform, but the podcasts are fun. So
yeah, I love your podcasts. They're really great to listen to. Great way to start my day.
Oh man, I really appreciate that. And, I will tell people, so the sound quality right now is crap. Well, actually, I'm not going to say crap, but it's not fantastic, but the info quality I think is pretty solid. And a lot of these are,
for sure.
I'll just think of a certain topic that I really want to talk about. So I've recently talked about, really dialing in, like, what's my carnivore checklist? What's my daily routine like? Kind of removing excuses from whatever approach you're following. So I talk a lot about mindset on there. I get really fired up. A lot of the time, like, I'll just be on the way to the gym in the morning and I'll be in my car and I'll just straight up turn on the voice recorder and just go for it. So if people want a lot more content and they want faster content, where I can really just riff about these topics, definitely check out the podcast. That's Will to Win podcast. So you can check that out, everywhere podcasts are. But yeah, man, that's basically where I'm at right now. And then if people want to check out the programs, it's primalbody.co, primalbody.co. And we've got the lean program, the strong program, and the sculpt program up. And then we've got a few more ones coming up, endurance, power, which is going to be very explosive, Olympic lifting style. There's a calisthenics one coming out. There is a toning one coming out for women that's more body weight and at home focused. And then further down the line, there is a kung fu program coming out that is, it's like martial arts workouts that I've done over the years, that people can do at home. And it's a great way to stay in shape. Very, very fun to do as well.
Very cool. Well, I'll link to all of that for sure. And thank you so much for your time today, William. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. It's always a pleasure.
Have a good one.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered, or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Carnivore Cast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.